In this module, we'll be discussing eggs and breakfast. The objectives of this module are: describe the composition of eggs, purchase and store eggs properly, apply various cooking methods to eggs, prepare pancakes and griddle cakes, plan breakfast menus to provide a variety of breakfast food options for customers, and prepare breakfast coffee and tea beverages. So let's discuss some of the functions of eggs and what they do for menus and recipes. Eggs provide texture, they provide flavor and structure, they provide moisture and nutrition to items. Eggs leaven and thicken bakery items such as breads or quick breads, pancakes, and the like. Eggs bind ingredients such as crumbs on breaded foods. Eggs enrich and tenderize breads and cakes. And eggs extend the shelf life of some baked goods. So let's take a look at the different parts of an egg. The primary parts of an egg, first and foremost, are the shell. This is made of calcium carbonate, which is excreted in the last few minutes of the egg-laying process, which is why it's in this unique and distinct oval shape. The egg yolk in the center is the fat that the chicken would use to feed on as it grows. The albumin, also known as egg white, is that part that surrounds the egg yolk and keeps the egg yolk in a suspended animation style, so it's not sloshing around or moving around. It also provides protein as well. Other parts, we have the outer membrane. This outer membrane is on the inside of the shell, and if you've ever peeled a hard-boiled egg before, you probably have seen that outer membrane. You've had to break through it to get into the egg. Once you get through that little bit of outer membrane, you can easily peel the egg without any sticking or difficulty or tearing the egg itself. The inner membrane resides around the yolk. And just like the outer membrane, it helps to suspend the yolk and keep it tight inside the egg sac itself. The chelacy cords are the connection between the outer and the inner membranes. And as a piece of plastic wrap would get all twisted up if you just rolled it around on the table, so is the chelacy cord. It gets twisted up. The tighter it's twisted, as it's a young egg, the tighter it is, it's going to suspend that egg yolk in the middle. As it ages, the egg yolk, the chelacy cords are going to get weaker and weaker and will allow that yolk to kind of move from one side to the other or to the bottom or to the top. The germinal spot is the little spot of red on the egg yolk, which is typically where reproduction would happen with the chicken if it were to germinate and actually be a full-blown chicken. In most cases, it's not. In the case of eggs, typically you don't have that issue. And the air cell, which is the little pocket of air that gets bigger and bigger as it ages, as the egg gets older and older. This is one of the reasons why you may see a divot in the bottom of a hard-boiled egg. It's because of this air cell getting older and older. Typically, it's best thought that older eggs are better for hard boiling or boiling in general because the fact the air cell gives a little more room for the shell to be peeled away. Eggs come in 3 different grades. Grade AA is the freshest egg, most commonly used in prepared foods and bakeries. When broken, the yolk and the white will not spread out much, covering a small area. The white is firm and thick, while the yolk is round and stands up high. Grade A is the most commonly sold egg and is often seen in grocery stores. When broken, the contents will spread out a little bit. The whites are thinner, but still firm, and the yolk is round and stands up from the surface. Grade B eggs have whites that are thinner and yolks that spread wider and flatter than eggs of a higher grade. While still a good quality, they don't present as well as others. This grade is usually used to make liquid, frozen, or dried egg products. When it comes to eggs, size matters. Eggs come in a variety of different sizes. Knowing what size egg you're using will help determine the number of eggs to use in a recipe, especially if that recipe is based on weight or volume. Most recipes are written for either large or medium eggs. So as a recap, in the United States, eggs are stored at a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Prior to storage, eggs are washed with a mild sanitizing solution in warm water to kill any salmonella bacteria. Fresh eggs can then be stored for 4 to 5 weeks past the packing date in the refrigerator. In Europe, however, it's illegal to wash eggs, and instead farmers vaccinate chicken against salmonella, treating it at the source. With the cuticle still intact, refrigeration could cause mildew growth and contamination, so they're kept at room temperature.
The USDA has laid out guidelines for how commercial eggs should be produced, processed and stored to make sure eggs remain safe for public consumption. The UK has their own regulations, but their regulations are quite opposite to those in the US, making it illegal for eggs produced in the UK to be sold in the US and those produced in the US to be sold in the UK. But if guidelines in both the cases are made for food safety and are in the public interest, why are they so contrasting to one another? Which of them is the right practice, or are both of them equally good? In the case of American eggs, the USDA requires its egg farms to properly wash and sanitize their eggs before they reach consumers in order to remove any dirt and feces on the exterior of the eggs. These contaminants are bacterial in nature and may pose a food safety threat when they enter a kitchen environment. For instance, one may crack open an egg and then proceed to prepare a sandwich with those bacteria-ridden hands. Also, eggshells are porous, so there's a possibility of microbes leaking inside the egg. As per the regulation, eggs are washed with warm water, at least 20 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the internal temperature of the eggs, and at a minimum of 90 degrees Fahrenheit. A detergent that won't impart any foreign odours to the eggs is also used. After washing, the eggs are rinsed with a warm water spray containing a chemical sanitizer to remove any remaining bacteria, and then are dried to remove excess moisture. Every step of this whole process is scientifically designed and must be executed with extreme care, otherwise this procedure can lead to more damage than good. For example, the drying of eggs is crucial because a dry eggshell acts as a barrier to bacterial intrusion, while the presence of moisture makes the shell more permeable, exposing it to a pathogen attack. Furthermore, moisture itself may act as a medium for bacterial growth, and water provides an excellent vehicle for pathogens such as salmonella. The right temperature of warm washing water is important because water colder than the egg could cause the contents of the egg to contract, sucking polluted water in through the shell. Results may get worse if a facility is not careful enough to regularly change the washing water and eggs are left to sit in the dirty bath. With such high risk of bacteria, if cleaned improperly, the UK and almost all of the world except the US believe that eggs should not be washed or cleaned before they're sold to consumers. As far as dirty eggs are concerned, the EU's egg marketing law encourages good husbandry on farms. Because eggs can't be cleaned or washed, it's in the farmer's best interest to produce the cleanest eggs possible, as no one is going to buy their eggs if they're dirty. This may not sound too convincing to you, but there's more to it. An egg carries a thin layer of coating on its outer surface called cuticle. This layer naturally protects eggs from almost all contamination and also keeps the eggs fresh for longer periods. Washing eggs damage most of this protective layer and makes them vulnerable to contamination from pathogens and other microorganisms. In absence of washing, an egg is capable of protecting itself naturally, and if care is taken while handling the eggs, the contamination of kitchen environments can also be eliminated. The UK thus believes that a little care is better than the huge risk and cost of washing eggs. Another thing that makes British eggs and American eggs different to one another is how they're stored. In the UK and almost everywhere in Europe, you can see eggs sitting in unrefrigerated shelves of supermarkets. The EU regulations stipulates that eggs should in general not be refrigerated before selling to the final consumer. Chilled eggs, when left outside at room temperature during transit between the supermarket and the customer's home, may sweat and form moisture on its surface, facilitating the growth of bacteria and probably their ingression into the egg. The American system, on the other hand, instructs its seller to refrigerate eggs under 40 degrees Fahrenheit in order to decrease the risk of salmonella. Salmonella isn't a big problem in the UK because European farmers have been vaccinating their hens against salmonella since the 1990s and have received good results. Vaccination in the US is not a common practice. Because of all of these differences in how eggs are processed and stored in the two nations, British eggs are significantly richer in taste. But how would you know? British eggs can't be sold in the US, and the US ones in the UK.
So the age-old question, brown eggs versus white eggs. Which one's better for you and which one should I buy? The answer is quite simple. Egg color depends on the breed of the chicken. For example, a white leghorn chicken lays white-shelled eggs, while a Plymouth Rocks and Rhode Island Reds lay brown-shelled eggs. The different breed of chicken will have different colored earlobes, and the earlobes are actually the determinant factor of this. Red or brown earlobed chickens will lay brown eggs. White earlobe chickens will lay white eggs. There really is no other distinction between them. And I need to be clear that there is absolutely no other distinction between the eggs than the color of the shell. They contain the same nutrients, they contain the same phytochemicals and lipids, and all of those things are identical. The only thing that's different is the shell. Now, in many cases, brown shells will be a little thicker, and that also has to do with the particular chicken and how they lay the eggs. There are even green eggs and blue eggs, pink eggs and speckled eggs, but these usually come from the chicken with different elements in their diets as opposed to their breed of chicken. As you can see from the picture, even the green eggs have shades. So the darker color green eggs come from those red earlobe chickens, where the lighter color green eggs come from the white earlobe chickens. We talked about salmonella bacteria in eggs, so let's talk a little bit about sanitation. Eggs require time and temperature controlled for safety. They are what's known as TCS foods, time and temperature controlled for safety foods. This means that they have to stay refrigerated and they can't stay out for very long, and when they're cooked, they have to be used or discarded within a certain length of time. Inadequate cooking or improper storing may lead to foodborne illnesses such as salmonellosis. Eggs can be pasteurized at 140 degrees Fahrenheit for 3.5 minutes. This is called a quick pasteurization or a high temperature pasteurization, which pasteurizes the eggs without any negligible effect to the egg itself. Never leave egg dishes at room temperature. Egg dishes at room temperature are highly susceptible to bacteria and bacterial growth, particularly if there's already salmonella on or in the egg. Then it can grow at a much rapider pace if it's left at room temperature. Food service operations can purchase eggs in many different forms, from whole eggs to egg whites only made from fresh or frozen, egg yolks available fresh or frozen, and something called PWE, or pasteurized whole egg. This is a liquid egg which usually has citric acid added to prevent what we call greening effect, which we'll talk about here shortly. The reason why we may choose one of these products over the other is utilization, how we're going to utilize it. If I'm making a ton of meringue, then I don't necessarily need egg yolks. If I'm making custards, maybe I don't need the egg whites. If I'm doing nothing but scrambling eggs, then maybe it's a good idea to buy the pasteurized whole egg. Additionally, there are egg substitutes for those people who are concerned about cholesterol or who are concerned about health issues. Perhaps maybe they have an allergy to eggs. In this case, they can purchase something called an egg substitute. Here's an example on the screen with a soy product. This is not necessarily an egg. As a matter of fact, it even says egg-free on the package. So be aware of what you are getting and how it's going to be utilized. You wouldn't be able to use this as a fried egg product. This would be for scrambling or for using as an ingredient. Eggs are a power pack of nutrients. Eggs contain vitamins A, which is good for eyesight, vitamin D, which is good for, well, pretty much everything, vitamin E, which is excellent for your health and immunity, vitamin K for clotting, and vitamin B complex for energy production. Eggs are rich in minerals and contain less cholesterol now than previously. And egg whites do not contain cholesterol at all and are often added to dishes to reduce the total fat content. Eggs can be cooked in a multitude of different ways. Dry heat cooking methods include baking, such as shirred and quiche. Wait a second, I said shirred. I wonder if anyone's ever had a shirred egg before. Well, you might actually have. A shirred egg is actually an egg that is baked. So a lot of times what you would do is you would take a piece of ham or some bacon, or you can even do this in a muffin tin by itself, and then crack the egg into it and then put it in the oven and bake it. Sauteing eggs, such as scrambled and omelets. Pan frying eggs, sunny side up, over easy, over medium, over hard. Basted eggs, where you take a little bit of the fat and baste over the egg. You can use moist heat cooking methods, such as soft cook or soft boiled. These simmer for 3 to 5 minutes in the shell. Hard cooked or hard boiled eggs simmer for 12 to 15 minutes in the shell. And then poached eggs simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes without the shell at a slightly lower temperature. There are 2 recognized types of omelets. The French omelet, which is pictured on the left, is rolled up into an oval or a cylindrical shape before serving. It's made similarly to scrambled eggs, but stop stirring before the egg is almost set to allow the egg to knit together. At this point, you can add cooked internal ingredients and roll the omelet onto the plate. The American omelet is folded in half. American omelets cook longer than the French counterparts, hence the crust. Let the eggs cook for a few minutes until the bottom gets a nice golden brown color. For the American method, there is no pan shaking or swirling around. When your eggs are practically done, spoon in your fillings and fold in half. Voila, as the French say. So why is there a green ring around the yolk? Sometimes when you hard cook an egg, this will come across really plain. You'll see it very clearly. Sometimes it can be even worse than it looks. Properly hard cooked eggs are uniformly cooked throughout and have a golden color to the egg yolk. A green discoloration covers the yolk when the in-shell eggs are overcooked, particularly overboiled. This happens because the hydrogen in the egg combines with the sulfur in the egg yolk, and that gives it that garish green color. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't hurt anything. But as you can see, it can transition from a slight green ring around the yolk at the top of the screen to a very pronounced green egg yolk in the middle, which is completely green almost all the way throughout. This is simply a factor of heat and time. You cook it too long for too long a period of time, and it will continue to cook that hydrogen in the egg white and interact with the sulfur in the egg yolk. The green ring is harmless, however, and it's safe to eat. It doesn't affect its taste. All it affects is its color. So let's summarize and discuss this section of the module and talk about eggs. Eggs are versatile. They can be served in a number of different ways. In the United States, eggs should be stored refrigerated at 41 degrees or lower. Eggs are sorted by grades and sizes, and it's important to know the size of an egg when you're dealing with a recipe. Eggs are a good source of protein and fats, while not being nearly as high in cholesterol as portrayed. A brown egg and a white egg are from different chickens, and it's based on the earlobe color, but are essentially the same. Egg yolks will turn green when overcooked due to a reaction with the trace sulfur contents in the yolk. In this section, we're going to continue our discussion and talk about breakfast and brunch.
Breakfast, the most important meal of the day. Healthy, high in fiber, fuel to go, go, go.
You're gonna be full no matter what you order.
Brunch, the most indulgent meal of the week.
Who wants a lobster meatball?
Decadent,
Great.
boozy, wrapped in bacon and slathered in hollandaise. Two very different ways to start the day. Which one are you? Breakfast or brunch? Can I get an espresso?
I'm sorry, sir, we don't have espresso.
At the Telwink Grill in Houston, Texas, it's breakfast all day, 7 days a week. All right, then I guess I'll just have an American coffee.
Coffee.
What this menu lacks in fancy European hot beverages, it makes up for abundantly.
Hearty, homemade, like Mama would cook it.
Deep inside breakfast country, the law of the land is clear. Asking for your eggs to get poached is enough to get you shot.
Well, no, not enough to get you shot. Eggs Benedict will get you shot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Former Marine and 35-year Telwink regular Pat Forster knows where he stands on the breakfast-brunch divide. Wheat or brioche?
Wheat, because I don't know what a brioche is.
Donut or beignet?
Definitely a donut.
On most weekend mornings, breakfast is Forster's only meal of the day.
I come in here, I eat, I don't eat till tonight. This just fuels me for the day.
Now, it's totally acceptable to eat breakfast alone. But brunch? That's all about the socializing and the hard stuff. And don't forget the jazz trio. A few hours after my breakfast, my friends Abby, Mary Elizabeth, Steve, and Calvin crawled out of bed to join me at Houston's Backstreet Cafe for brunch.
I think breakfast is more like eating to live, and brunch is more like living to eat.
Ooh. The rich, creamy, and glistening emulsion that is hollandaise sauce was only one of the hedonistic pleasures at Backstreet and later at Houston's RDG. Octopus ceviche. Banana stuffed French toast. Grapefruit margaritas. Mulberry mimosas. Ooh. It's really good. He needs another drink.
I'm gonna go home and take a nap after this.
Where would we be as a culture if we were all brunch people?
We'd be fat and slovenly and never getting to work, I guess, right?
Mark Meyer is chef and owner of Cook Shop in New York City. Where would we be as a culture if we were all breakfast people?
I think we'd probably be very boring.
Meyer celebrates the differences between breakfast and brunch by serving both.
This is something I'm going to come in, I'm going to read my paper, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, I'm done.
They're sexy, these eggs. They're fun.
Yeah, they are.
You date these, you marry those. So can breakfast and brunch get along? That's very nice. There's room at the table for both.
So let's talk about some of the different types of breakfasts. Continental style is familiar to any traveler who's ever stayed in a hotel. It's a light morning meal typically consisting of pastries and baked goods, fruit, toast, and coffee. It's usually served buffet style and modeled after the European breakfast, similar to what one would enjoy in France or the Mediterranean. Having spent time in France and Italy, I can tell you that this is exactly what you would get for breakfast. Continental breakfasts emphasize simplicity and focus on foods that are easily can be stocked. Originating in England and Ireland, a full-service breakfast is something that's very familiar to us. This full-service breakfast in these particular countries often consisted of eggs and various meats and commonly more than one type of fried potato, such as hash browns or home fries, potatoes O'Brien, or potatoes pancake, and usually some form of bread or toast. Here in the southern United States, we often include things such as grits and biscuits and sausages. Buffet-style breakfasts are a form of service known as à la Francois. Buffets are often served at various different places, including banquets and catering functions, and even some casinos do a breakfast-style buffet. often means that you can eat and eat and eat until you're full, which is a good bang for your buck. They often consist of eggs in varying styles and some kind of meats such as ham, bacon, sausage, small juices, and toast with butter and jam plus coffee or tea. In many ways, this resembles a full-service breakfast, just served buffet style. Let's talk about some of the different kinds of breakfast meats that are available. Bacon is the ubiquitous breakfast meat. Typically, when we think of bacon, we think of pork bacon, but there is turkey bacon, chicken bacon, and soy bacon. The problem with the latter three is that in order to get the bacon taste, you have to add so many different flavorings and chemicals to it and preservatives to be able to keep the product from turning bad. This is one of the reasons why scientists have actually discovered that eating pork bacon in moderation is healthier for you than trying to eat any of the alternatives in excess. Canadian bacon is another alternative. Instead of coming from the belly of the pig, which causes it to be very fatty in normal cases of bacon, the Canadian bacon comes from the loin, which is on the top of the pig. And this gives it this very distinctive looking, almost ham looking quality to it. It's a solid, long muscle with very little fat in it, and once it's smoked and cured, it gives it a very unique texture and flavor to it. Speaking of hams, we've got two different kinds of hams. We've got ham fresh, which it can come in cured and uncured styles, and we've got country ham. Fresh ham is typical of what we would see on the table at Christmas or Thanksgiving. It's generally a cooked and cured ham that's been smoked, but you can also get one that is uncured and smoked. You can get one that is uncured and raw and cook it like you would a roast. Country ham is a little bit different. Country ham is made by the process of salting and desiccation. So this salting will make sure that the ham is completely dried out or somewhat dried out. You can't get it completely dried out, but it's going to reduce its moisture content quite a bit. And also it will help impart some of the flavors that are packed in with the salt as well. And then it's served typically pan-seared with a little red-eye gravy is a great way of eating this. It's a little more salty than its traditional cousin. Additional breakfast meats, we've got breakfast sausage. Breakfast sausage comes in bulk sausage, comes in links, and it comes in patties. Bulk sausage can consist of things such as breakfast sausage that has sage and tarragon in it. It could be chorizo sausage, which is a spicy sausage. It could be a bulk andouille style sausage. So there's a lot of different ways. You can look at a sweet sausage, a savory sausage, a spicy sausage. There's various different ways this comes. The bulk sausage is great if you want to make your own sausages by stuffing them. It's good if you want to use it as some kind of force meat to stuff into another piece of something. So the bulk sausage allows you to be able to do that without having to break it out and tear it apart. The other alternatives, of course, are the patties, which we're very familiar with. These are just bulk sausage formed into patties. And then the links, which are stuffed into a casing and then smoked. Breakfast meats are not just about pork. We can also have steak, skirt steak and hanger steak, and ribeyes, New York strip, and lots of different others. Here in this picture, you'll see on top an example of a ribeye. And then below that, you've got a hanger steak. These hanger and skirt steaks are typically more beefy in flavor because they are more exercised meats, but they are also a little more stringy because of their nature. Whereas a ribeye steak is delicious, but it's not as exercised, so it's not going to be quite as beefy as these others. But personally, I like a steak in the morning. Oftentimes you'll hear about lox. Lox are smoked salmon. And this is different than hot smoked salmon. This is cold smoked salmon. So it's smoked at a temperature of about 85 degrees for, typically several hours. Before that, it's cured with a salt and sugar mixture that will help draw out some of the moisture out of that particular piece of salmon. So really what we're going for in this particular case is we're going for the moisture draw that's going to make it almost like the country ham that we talked about earlier, but the smoking is going to give it a slight smoky taste to it. And this is going to give it a very unique texture as well, as opposed to hot smoked salmon, which is going to get kind of pale and flaky. This is going to retain that beautiful salmon color, and it's going to give a little bit of a chewiness to the salmon as well. Think of it almost like salmon jerky without going so far as being completely dried out. And typically you would serve this on a bagel with a smear of cream cheese. Maybe you add a little onion or some capers, or maybe even a little diced cooked egg on there. Lots of different accoutrements that you can add with that. One of my favorite items in the morning are griddle cakes. Griddle cakes are not just pancakes. They come in various different sizes and shapes and styles. Griddle cakes refer to any batter or dough baked on a heated flat metal surface or griddle. These can be savory, they can be sweet, they can be a mixture of the two. One such griddle cake that we always think about is pancakes and waffles. This is batter that is usually leavened and cooked quickly on a grill or in a waffle iron with very little fat. The griddle cakes that you see in the picture here, the pancakes, gives it a nice fluffy texture to it by searing it on a flat top or in a saute pan and flipping it over once it starts to bubble. Then you're going to get a little rise out of it, a little puff out of that, and that's going to give it that nice soft texture. Whereas on the waffles, it's going to have that nice soft texture, but it's also going to have a crispiness to the shell on the outside, which gives us that extra little bit of texture in there that will separate it. Oftentimes when we have something that's too soft, we tend to get lost in the texture. By having something that's soft and crispy, it gives us something else to be able to concentrate on. Another form of griddle cakes are crepes. Crepes are thin, delicate, unleavened pancakes. So as opposed to the pancakes that we saw earlier, they had a leavening in them, whether that leavening is egg white or baking soda or some other kind of leavening. These do not have any leavening in them, so they're going to retain a very thin nature, and they're typically served either as a dessert with fruit or a compote of some kind, but they can also be served savory. One of my favorite dishes is a braised duck, shredded and mixed in with a couple of different spices and herbs, and then put into the crepe and finished with a little bit of Asian slaw and a drizzle of honey mustard, a hot honey mustard on top of it. So it's got a really nice savory flavor to it. Crepes are typically made using what's called a crepiere, which is a round sort of flat top, and you use this stick or dowel style thing to be able to spread the batter out and make it nice and thin. You can also do this in a saute pan, but you do need to use non-stick saute pans for this sort of thing. There's a bunch of different cereals and grains. We're not just talking about the cold cereals that we eat and the big sugary cereals that we like to have in the morning time, but there's lots of different other options as well. These are processed breakfast cereals that make up of rice and corn, oats and wheat. We've all seen the breakfast cereal aisle going through the grocery store. It's an innumerable amount of qualities and quantities of breakfast cereal, from the barely there sugary puffs of things to the almost break your teeth shards of hard granules of wheat germ. You can get anything and everything in between in the process. Cereals are oftentimes served hot or cold. Typically breakfast cereals like this are not served hot, they're served cold with milk, but you can also have hot cereals, which we'll get into in just a moment. And these are typically either ready to eat cereals in the case of this picture, or they can be prepared in the restaurant kitchen itself. Some of the hot cereal alternatives: oatmeal. Oatmeal is a great breakfast option. There's several different options you can see here, from the hot oatmeal with the caramelized bananas, to the granola bar in the center with fresh fruit inside of it, to the almost porridge-like consistency of the oatmeal on the end. You get a plethora of different options in there for it. So oatmeal, it's not just that you have to eat a package of oatmeal or a hot bowl of oatmeal every day. Granola is very simple. You toast the oats, you mix it with honey, and then you add in whatever ingredients you want to add into it and press it into a form and let it cool down. It's very simple to make granola bars. In the South, we're very familiar with grits, but outside of the South, we're probably more familiar with something called polenta. Grits are made from dried hominy corn, which is a traditional Southern dish that's served sweet or savory. Hominy corn is corn that has been soaked in lye and allowed to puff up, and then it's dried and then ground up into these grits. The difference between hominy and polenta is they don't soak the corn in lye in polenta. They just dry the corn as it is and then grind it up. It's almost like cornmeal in that particular case. And it's going to have a different flavor to it. If you've ever had hominy, maybe you had it at the kitchen table at some point. Hominy is this puffed white corn that almost has a sweetness to it. And that's a condition of the soaking in the lye. Breakfast beverages range from sweet to savory and include some of the following: coffees, tea, flavored teas, tisanes, and herbal teas, juices, and alcoholic beverages. Not all coffee is created equal, from the light roasted cinnamon color all the way up to the dark roasted Italian color. The roasting affects the flavor of it. The lighter the roast, the more green it's going to taste, and the darker the roast, the more bitter it's going to have. Typically, here in the United States, we tend to drink a medium city roast or a full city roast, where in France and Italy, they will drink the darker roasts. The cappuccino is made with a dark roast, and the espresso is made with the dark Italian roast. There's several different ways that you can brew coffee. Decoction is a process used in Turkish coffee where you actually boil the coffee with the grounds. The grounds in Turkish coffee are a lot more finely ground, and this will create what's called a crema on top, which is the cream or the frothy part that floats to the surface. In Turkish culture, this is called feet, and they say that it's not a proper Turkish coffee if it doesn't have little feet on top. Infusion is another method. This is typically how you would brew coffee through a low boiling point. An example of this would be a French press, where you pour the coffee into the French press, you pour the hot water in there, and then you let it sit or steep, and then you would press the plunger down to put all the sediment down at the bottom and just have the coffee liquid at the top. Drip is the most commonly done through a machine. Also, it's most common style here in the United States. However, as you can see from this picture, it's getting more and more common for drip to be done in a slow process. So this almost includes the infusion method in there as well. This allows for the coffee to be poured through the filter and slowly drip through, as opposed to being forced through like some coffee makers do. Espresso is another option, and this is a completely different process where hot water is forced through at great pressure through a finely ground coffee. This coffee is so finely ground and it's packed extraordinarily tight in there that by forcing water through it, it also will extract a lot more of the caffeine in the bean as opposed to some of the other methods. And this is why espresso is often thought to be highly caffeinated. There's various different tea qualities, from the black tea that we're very familiar with to green tea, white tea, and something called oolong. The black tea that we're familiar with, one of the most common is orange pekoe, which is what they make things such as Lipton with. It has an amber brown and strongly flavored texture to it. The leaves have been fermented, so when they are picked, they're picked mature and allowed to wash them first and then allowed to air dry them. And in this air drying process, they ferment. So you get this nice tea smell to it, this fermented tea smell. A little bit before that, they have green tea. Green tea has a yellowish green color with a slightly bitter flavor. The leaves have not been fermented, but they are essentially the same tea. You can do the exact same process. The only difference is they have not been fermented. They've just been dried out. White tea is a variation of green tea made from the young tea leaves that are air dried. So they're picked when they're very, very young, just budding out really, and not really getting a ton of chlorophyll yet. So they have that white color to them. Oolong tea has the characteristics of both the black tea and the green teas, and it's partially fermented. So from less fermentation or no fermentation with the white tea, the young leaves, the no fermentation with a little bit older leaves that have the chlorophyll in it to the green tea. The oolong sits in between there, and then the black tea is on the other end. Black teas also have various different variations depending on the kind of tea leaf it is. It could be Lapsang Suju, it could be Earl Grey, it could be various numbers of different kinds of teas that's going to have a little bit different characteristics. Earl Grey is going to have a slightly bitter taste to it, and it's going to be a very strong tea as opposed to the orange peacoat that we use here in the United States for Lipton and some of the other companies. It's going to be a mild tea that works very, very well for iced tea. Flavored teas, tisanes, and herbal teas are another category. Flavored teas are made with the oils, dried fruits, spices, flowers, or herbs in blended or unblended tea. So the basis for this is going to be tea. It's made with the tea leaf and the flavorings and combined with it. So this is essentially tea, but with flavoring. They can be served hot or cold. And typically, flavored teas don't contain caffeine because while they do contain the tea, they typically are diluted to the point with the fruit juices or the different spices, what have you, to the point where the caffeine is almost negligible in there. Tisanes are herbal infusions that do not contain any real tea. These tisanes and herbal teas are made from fresh or dried flowers, fruits, herbs, seeds, or roots. Chamomile, mint, ginger, ginseng, and hibiscus are all forms of tisanes and herbal teas. Tisanes and herbal teas are usually caffeine-free and may aid in digestion as well. One of my personal favorites is at the bottom of the screen. This is a hibiscus tea, and it's very commonly found in specialty markets anywhere that it might have Caribbean or Mexican ingredients in it, and it's a flower that's been dried, and really all you need is just that. It has a natural sweetness to it, so you don't really have to add sugar to it. I typically will add just a tiny bit of honey to mine, and I'll drink it hot, or in the summertime it's great just chilled down and served with ice. Breakfast juices can range from the sweet, such as pineapple, orange, mango, kiwi, etc., to the more savory juices, such as carrot, tomato, and green juices. They're consumed at breakfast when the stomach is empty. This will aid in digestion and absorption of essential vitamins and minerals into the body. There is a word of caution here, though, that too much consumption of anything with an acidic content, such as orange juice, pineapple juice, apple juice, tomato juice, if they're too acidic, you really shouldn't eat them without also eating food. You can eat them on an empty stomach, but you need to eat it with something right after that, because the acid in these will contribute to the acid of your stomach and could cause erosion of the stomach lining in the process, especially over time. From mimosas to sangrias, alcoholic beverages are an excellent addition to a brunch menu. They provide a low-cost, high-profit margin to the restaurant, and they can be served chilled, served over ice, blended, infused, heated, muddled, or in any other ways. You can see various different representations of it here on the page, from the simple mojito in the middle of the page on the left to the sangria at the bottom right of the page. There's tons of different ways that you can do this. Breakfast, typically you're not going to see this, but at brunch is where you will see your cocktails mostly, and you're going to have a little more time at brunch to sit down and enjoy with friends. It's a social event as opposed to breakfast. Sometimes can be very quick and ready to get your day started. So let's summarize this section and discuss some of the takeaways. Brunch is usually more upscale and social, whereas breakfast is usually more, well, more sometimes. Breakfast comes in many forms: continental, full service, and buffet. Typical American breakfast, which originated in England, usually has some form of potato, meat, and egg, and it can also be served with fruit, cereal, juices, coffee, and/or tea. Pancakes and waffles are leavened, whereas crepes are not. Coffee and tea come in a variety of colors and flavors to suit every customer's needs. And juices and alcoholic beverages are a mainstay in a typical brunch.